This is the day we have been given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. If this is your first time at Unity Church Unitarian, you are welcome here. If you have been here for decades, you are welcome here. If you're joining us online, know that you are welcome here. We're so glad you're with us. If you've come to be spiritually nourished, you are welcome in this place. If you come not knowing yet what it is you are longing for, you are welcome. My name is the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair. My pronouns are he, him, his. Since August 1st, I have served this congregation as your senior minister. It is good to be together. I do want to extend a special welcome to anyone visiting Unity Church this morning. If you are new to Unity Church, if you would, please fill out one of the visitor cards that are available in the pews, and then drop them in the offering basket as it goes by later in the service. We hope that you find in Unity Church a place that helps you to keep your balance, a community that inspires you to living a life of integrity and service and joy. Your gifts and your wounds are welcome. 2 quick announcements. One is that today is the last day to register for Chalice Circles. This is a small group ministry that meets regularly and discusses often the themes of the month. This is the last day to register. There's a place to register out in the parish hall. We also, every week, hold a session called Finding Yourself at Unity. It's upstairs in the Robbins Parlor. It will start at 10:15. In your program, it has the wrong focus for this week. It is actually the building tour this week. All right. Announcements being over, we will now enter into this sacred time together. So let us take a moment to center yourselves. Put your feet flat on the ground. Get your back in somewhat of a comfortable, and let us listen to the pealing of our bell.
The words of Francis Crozier. We light this chalice today as a people dedicated to personal growth. May it burn away the oppressions we have been taught and glow instead with the humility of learning. May it reignite our dreams for a better world and kindle our joy for simple living. May its warmth extend out into the forgotten alleyways of exclusion and bring us home to love, to welcoming, and to all the challenges, the questions, and the blessings of this beautiful path to becoming a blessed community. I love that hymn, thank you. On a March evening in 2023, so about a year and a half ago, I found myself standing at the edge of the Central Plaza in Cochabamba, Bolivia. It was magical. My eyes were drawn first to the buildings glowing against the night sky, their architectural details in stark relief, and then to colonnaded walkways, inviting exploration. The musical sound of water from the fountain emerged from the darkness. Ice cream cones in hand, we took it all in. Segundo, our friend and guide, identified the buildings: the cathedral, a cloister for nuns, government buildings. And then he shared something that stopped me in my tracks. When I was a child, this place intimidated me. What lingers for me now is how astonishingly easy it was for me to slip into tourist mode. From that vantage point, I saw only a lovely square with old world charm, where tourists like me gathered to drink coffee. But these buildings tell another, darker story. They were meant to project power. The power of conquerors over the conquered, the power of the church. Young Segundo knew trucks were routed around the plaza to preserve its sanctity. And while the educated and well-off were welcome, a poor indigenous child like him was not. How had I so easily forgotten the bloody history of Spanish rule, colonial rule, and its ongoing impact on the indigenous people? How is it that I, who spoke no Spanish and had been in Bolivia barely 1 week, could feel I belonged unquestionably in this space, whereas for Segundo, it conjured conflicting memories? What do we do when the often invisible privileges we carry are suddenly made visible?
Each time that we gather in worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together we recognize the cycle of life and of death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We now take a moment to settle ourselves, to pause, to take a deep breath together, maybe keep getting that back comfortable in the pews, and enter a time of meditation, reflection, or prayer. William Blake wrote that joy and sorrow are woven fine in a single garment. As we share with one another the milestones of joys and sorrows, celebrations and concerns that mark our lives from their beginning to their endings, we open our hearts to both giving and receiving care, as it is essential to deepening our spiritual lives and being in community together. We hold and are held by each other. Today, we lift in celebration Unity member Bernice Hansen, who turned 98 years young on Friday, September 13th. Bernice joined Unity in 1988 and was active for many years in our care team. She participates in our online services now. So actually, if everybody could just turn around, there's a camera right there. If you could wave to Bernice, say happy birthday. She would also love to get a card from our congregational care table. So happy birthday, Bernice. We also hold Unity members Julie and Tompkin Coleman in our caring embrace as they mourn Julie's beloved cousin, Stacy Ludwig, who died from leukemia this last Wednesday. She had just turned 62. Stacy was very close with Julie and her family, and her loss is deeply felt. It is true of our human condition that on any Sunday we gather, there are grieving, aching hearts. Those mourning a loved one, a person or a pet, someone who, due to illness, is no longer present in the way that they once were, to share in life's joys. Among us are people with new or recurring diagnoses, facing uncertainties about their future and adjusting to new physical realities. Among us are those who struggle with mental health and those who love them fiercely, unconditionally. Among us, too, are those celebrating new life, new loves, new opportunities, and those whose daily spiritual practice of raising children includes adjusting to a new back-to-school rhythm this month, the delightful challenges that new routines and new years bring. Our hearts expand to hold all these truths and so many more as we bear witness to one another. I invite you now to speak into this holy sanctuary or the silence of your own hearts the names of those you wish to lift into our collective embrace this morning. We'll take a moment of silence to hold those names and so many more. Will you pray with me? God of many names and the unnamed whisper of the heart, Spirit of life and love, we are gathered in witness to one another's lives, seeking solace, guidance, and the strength to navigate the challenges that surround us, knowing that we sometimes fall short of our best intentions and our best selves. And so we also seek paths of reconciliation, of healing, of forgiveness. We ask for that reconciliation and healing within ourselves, among our community gathered here, and out into a broader world desperate for healing and reconciliation. We gather too in joyful celebration today, grateful for the lives we have and share and for the opportunity to join in song and ritual, connecting us to a deeper truth, meaning, and belonging. We pray in gratitude for being here together, embracing the beauty and promise of life before us as we weave our thoughts and intentions into this shared space. Amen.
Unity Church is framed by statements of conscience, known as its ends statements. One of those is generously give and openly receive compassionate care in times of joy, sorrow, and transition. Our compassionate care extends beyond the walls of this church to communities with whom we share a common interest. Each week, the larger portion of our offering goes to these community partners. Today, the offering recipient is the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, ILCM. It provides free immigration legal representation to low-income immigrants and refugees in Minnesota and North Dakota. ILCM works to educate the community about immigration matters, advocates for public policies which respect universal human rights, and this collection will support their internship program, where participants learn to navigate the complexities of the immigration system in the Twin Cities. Will the ushers please come forward? May the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts be given in gratitude this day. Let the offering now be taken. From Carrie Kopnick, Letters After My Name. I pull another basket of steaming dishes out of the dishwasher in our church basement. My partner in the kitchen cleanup grabs a clean dish towel to dab the pools of water from the upturned soup bowls. They ask, "So, what's your undergraduate in?" The conversation that happens in church kitchens are my absolute favorites. I have been washing dishes in church basements since I was 11. Kitchen ministry fills my heart. But not this time, not this conversation. I know the look I'll get. I know they won't mean harm, but I can feel the shame creep from my heart to my face. I am staff here. They pay me a chunk from their operating budget to direct the ministry to and with their children and teens. Surely I have a degree, preferably a master's degree, likely even a professional license of some kind too. Actually, I don't. I didn't finish my undergrad. I turned to load the next round of soup bowls. And while I want to say I was close to a degree in child psych, if I move back to that state, I'll finish up. But I just spray the bowls with the restaurant-style sprayer. Bits of barley and carrots fly everywhere. The conversation stops. My eyes don't linger to see the raised eyebrows, the quick flash of judgment. It's not that I didn't want to finish school. I just came from a working-class family where college visits and choosing the right school were a foreign world. My high school teachers didn't see anything special in me. My brain functions more like a modern dance number done in the woods upside down than a neat and tidy ballet performance of Swan Lake. So I tumbled out of high school and headed where my friends went, to a big public research institution that was all about third position with absolutely no woods. It's not surprising that I left early, feeling stupid. I worked in what could have been the Ms. Magazine's top 10 low-wage jobs for women until my Unitarian Universalist congregation needed a religious education educator, and I applied. We were wildly successful, doubling the number of registered children and then doubling again. We won an award for growth and innovation and finally had to buy a church building to house our booming congregation. I served on district and continental boards for my professional organization, and my blog was often featured in the denominational magazine. But I never applied to be formally credentialed. How could I? I would have had to face the credentialing committee without any letters after my name. My faith says that all are welcome. My faith says that we are all whole and holy and good. I have myself said this to dozens of children and teens, and yet we have miles to go to make this so.
There we go. One of the middle pieces of the 6-month-long process of calling a minister is a practice of preaching in a neutral pulpit. It goes like this. Sometime between the initial set of interviews on Zoom and the week-long candidating week that ends with a congregational vote, the search committee invites pre-candidates to interview in person. As part of that interview, the pre-candidates preach at a neutral pulpit, a place where the search committee can see you preach, but that isn't the congregation that you're coming from or the congregation that you're interviewing for. This is an important step because at this point in the process, everything is confidential, right? But even in the midst of that confidentiality, both the minister and the search committee are trying to figure out if it's a good fit, if this minister belongs to this congregation. So it is, as you might imagine, a relatively high-stakes sermon. You want to preach to the neutral congregation that's there in front of you, but you also want to preach to the search committee. You want to show your academic and intellectual chops, but you also want to be personable and approachable. More than anything else, you absolutely want to avoid saying anything that will immediately disqualify you from consideration. So the neutral pulpit site I preached at last winter was, like Unity, a congregation that had 2 services. I preached the first service and was feeling pretty good about how it had gone. For the most part, the congregation was engaged. I got a couple raised eyebrows that I didn't really know what were about, but that's okay. I was particularly proud of one line about how my grandmother would sometimes talk about Jesus au gratin, the 5-pound potato casseroles delivered by church members to folks in need who were sick or who just had a baby, who just lost someone. How that tangible expression of a community's care felt like spiritual practice. And then after that first service, the hosting minister showed me into their office to take a breath between services and then very distinctly closed the door behind us. Sat me down on their couch and said, "Oscar, you are in Minnesota. It is hot dish." This was an introduction of sorts to the Minnesota way. Of course, I corrected this by the second service. It went better that time. I'm happy to report I have since tried hot dish. We will come back to that later. But here's the deep theological point to begin the morning. Belonging is knowing that it is hot dish and not casserole. Or more broadly, knowing without needing to use words, this is how we do things here. Knowing the cultural norms and practices that are unspoken but mean that you are with your people. Well, there's great power and comfort in that sense of belonging. Last week I asked you to think about what draws you to this place. Why is it that you keep coming back here? I've been a part of 7 Unitarian Universalist congregations at this point in 4 states and 2 continents, and in all of them, there's often a common story. I walked in the first time, looked around, and realized that I had found my people, and I have been here ever since. Sometimes that recognition is easy to name. You can often find a gathering of Unitarian Universalist ministers by the prevalence of Priuses and Subarus in a parking lot. You see that and you know this is the right coffee shop. Sometimes it's harder to name, but it is a comfort. Even getting hot dish wrong, it's been very comfortable for my family and I to settle into this congregation because, Unity, you are very, very Unitarian Universalist. And that's a set of cultural norms and eccentricities that we know well and love and recognize and share in. But I wonder if we might complicate that feeling just a little bit. Certainly Carrie Kopnick, the UU religious educator who wrote this morning's reading, can. Letters after her name. Last week, my daughter, Ailish, started 2nd grade, and waiting for the bus one morning, we had a conversation about how many grades there were. One thing led to another, and I ended up telling her, after some mental math, that I had finished 26th grade. Doctorate, master's, bachelor's, most of another master's degree, plus the 12 that she knew. I'm comfortable in communities defined by letters behind your name. My parents pushed my sister and I to excel in school. They had the resources to support that. And we both ended up with plenty of letters and stable, successful careers. But there's a shadow side to that. On our first day of school, we got one of those signs for Ailish. You've probably seen them on social media. My name is, my teacher is, what do I want to be when I grow up? Her favorite color was pink, favorite band Taylor Swift. What did she want to do when she grew up? I want to be a mom. When I grow up, I want to be a mom. Not an astronaut, not a scientist, but the kind of person she loves most in the whole world. And I paused I paused wondering how, if, to explain this first day of school picture to my new congregation. What does that mean? When we talk about belonging, we're necessarily making normative statements. Here's what we expect in this setting. What we implicitly understand to be the agreements shared among most people in the room. The challenge is that statements about expectation, as simple as UU ministers often drive Toyota Priuses, can quickly become judgments, right? If you are a UU minister who does not drive a Toyota Prius, you must not care about the environment. Somewhat tragically, there was a group of UU ministers who left their Priuses behind to buy Teslas, and now the implicit agreements that they thought they had when they bought those cars are perhaps not the ones that they are showing off in the moment. The challenge is also in moments when we're forced to examine the implicit assumptions about belonging, making explicit some part of who feels like they belong that we would rather just ignore. Now, those normative statements, explicit or implicit, aren't always bad, right? That's not how we do things here is a really powerful ethical point. It's powerful because it sets expectations in the context of group behavior. Sometimes the best critique of bad behavior is contrasting it with established norms that everybody understands. This is the way we do things here. When you depart from those norms, you are weird. That is the power of that judgment. And there's also an element of this that's self-protective, right? Because a community defines who belongs with implicit agreements that draw a distinction between those inside and those outside. It's self-protective because whenever you add somebody or something from the outside, the system changes. Making sure that the minister knows to say hot dish instead of casserole is a way to establish expectations in a community, the things that the system does not want to change, even as some change is inevitable. We're actually going to pick up this thread in a sermon in 2 weeks. So, setting aside the hot dish image for now, the point is this. Welcome, if we're doing it well, true welcome that becomes belonging, is more than simply saying, you can join us in this set of behaviors. It is, you in your fullness belong here. And we say that even knowing that some of our implicit agreements with each other may shift now that you're here. Because when people belong to a community, when they're truly welcomed in, it becomes a reciprocal relationship. The community can make claims on individuals enforcing norms, right? Like call it hot dish instead of casserole. But importantly, the people that belong in a community can also make claims on that community. Claims like Carrie Kopnick's, calling us to do better about how we make assumptions about who is in our congregation. One last big jump for this morning. Who belongs to a Unitarian Universalist church? Who does the church belong to? Usually this is a relatively straightforward question to answer in our tradition. The church belongs to its members. The members belong to the church. There are 200 years of argument about how that works, but the basic question is relatively settled, except that it isn't in St. Paul, Minnesota. Here's how unity frames that question of who belongs, who the church belongs to. The moral owners of Unity Church-Unitarian are members of Unity Church-Unitarian. There we go, pretty straightforward. And others who yearn for the beloved community and see Unity Church-Unitarian as an instrument for its realization. The beloved community is engaged in the work of the Spirit. It is community at the highest level of reality and possibility, where love and justice prevail. That's the thing that we are looking for. So in this congregation, the church doesn't just belong to the people in this room. It belongs to all of those who yearn for the beloved community and see this place as a way to get there. At the risk of repeating myself, this is a radical statement for a church to take, one that I've been sitting with for 6 months now. In the context of this morning, it means that who belongs in the community and who gets to decide that is not just up to the people right here this morning, or even the people who have signed the membership book over the years. It is a broad understanding of belonging. All those who see Unity Church as an instrument, a tool for making the world a better place. That's a commitment. Rather than absolving the folks in this room of responsibility to welcome people in, it creates an obligation, right? How do we, who are already here, ensure that the moral owners of the congregation, the people who long for love and justice to prevail, are also welcomed here? If they already belong, and it sure looks like they do, how do we respond when they ask us to do better? When they might make some claim on us, grounded in that sense of shared belonging? That's a complex question because it might ask us to re-examine some of our cultural norms. Some of it might be simple. Maybe there are other words to use in addition to hot dish. Some are more challenging. How do we understand our community as, in some sense, belonging to include non-members in other states who tune in to watch on YouTube every week, but see themselves in some way connected to Unity Church-Unitarian? How do we respond when a new visitor says, I think I could find a place here, but the way you all do, something that Oscar said from the pulpit, makes me wonder if there's a place for me? What do we do when the norms that we implicitly hold are questioned? This is not just a question for the church, right? But the church can be a place where we work it out. It was striking to me watching the presidential debate this week, the race this month, this year, how one candidate kept coming back to the same point over and over again, even when the question was about something completely different. They, he kept saying, are coming to take away our land, jobs, security, pets. An entire candidacy built on the fear of the other, on the fear of the change that is inevitable when you add someone to a system. Fear of the other is powerful, and this man has been successful in weaponizing fear, turning it into a political movement. But that's such a simplified and grim way of looking at the possibility of this moment. It doesn't have to be that way. It never has been as simple as that. Communities change constantly. It has always been thus. John Sherman, a member here at Unity, welcomed me to the office with a book on Minnesota history. It begins, this is in the preface, Minnesota prides itself on its reputation for clean government, not making a fuss, eating bland food, not saying what we mean, attending church and going to the lake. Does that sound familiar? It's not meant to be a laugh line. The commonplaces, the author goes on to say, tell some big truths about Minnesota, but at best they roughly approximate us. At worst, they distort who we are and have been. They overlook Minnesota's roots in Indian removal, thank you, its history of anti-Semitism and racism. They marginalize those who failed or were simply different. They lure us into smugness. Just as important to me as a historian, they ignore what is complex, interesting, troubling, ambiguous, dark in us and our past. They deprive historical actors of the complicated mix of self-interest, good motives, blindness, and accident that makes us who we are. Welcome calls us to embrace change. It calls us to embrace all the complexity of all that we are or might be. To be truly welcome, we are welcoming in a whole, authentic self with all the nuance that that entails. To be willing to open our understanding of who belongs, who welcomes, and who is welcomed. To say we are in this community together, and none of us have a privileged place to claim what the norms are. So yes, a few weeks ago, after moving here, I tried hot dish. Now, it was at the Minnesota State Fair, so it was hot dish on a stick. For anyone out of state watching online, hot dish on a stick is meatballs and tater tots on a stick, covered in corn batter, deep fried, and served with a dipping sauce that I am pretty sure was just Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. This is probably the most Minnesotan thing that I've done since I've been here. It was delicious. But is it any less of a Minnesota thing to say that the hot dish stand was right between curry and pot stickers? If the Minnesota State Fair includes fried ranch dressing and indigenous wild rice on a stick, if the Spam curds are right across the street from teriyaki chicken, also on a stick, of course not. The implicit assumption at the Minnesota State Fair is not about what the food will be, it is about the presence of a stick. I'm pretty sure the diversity of foods is what makes it such a statewide institution. So who welcomes? Who is welcomed? Who belongs? How does the institution or state or country determine belonging? Those are always going to be complex questions. How norms get set and who gets to set them says a whole lot about a community. But we, Unitarian Universalists, are at our best when our understanding of that welcome is broad and warm. And we are at our worst when we lean into the smallness of norms that become judgment. May we reach for that expansive welcome this day and in the days to come. Our closing hymn is aspirational. Will you rise in body or in spirit and join in singing "We're Gonna Sit at the Welcome Table"? So as we go forth from this place, we go welcoming each other here, tomorrow, next week, building this community in all of its fullness. May it always be so, and amen.
We shall be known.